The old house on the hill was always empty. Locals said that the ghost of old Mrs. Henderson, who died under strange circumstances, lived there. On Halloween, a group of teenagers plucked up their courage and decided to test the legends. They entered the house, the smell of mold and decay filling their nostrils. Suddenly, they heard a quiet whisper that seemed to be coming from the depths of the house. "Go away," whispered a voice. The teenagers froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They turned to leave, but the door behind them knocked and closed. In the darkness they heard heavy footsteps approaching them, and then they saw her, old Mrs. Henderson, her face contorted with horror, her eyes glowing red. She extended her hand towards them, her fingers cold and bony. "You won't leave," she whispered. Panic gripped the teenagers. They rushed to the door, but it did not budge. The windows were boarded up, they were trapped. Old Mrs. Henderson approached slowly, her steps sounding like the creaking of old wood. Her gaze was directed at them, full of sinister joy. "You will be with me forever," she whispered. Her voice was like the rustle of dry leaves. One of the teenagers, Jake, remembered an old legend. It was said that Mrs. Henderson loved music. He took his phone out of his pocket and played an old song that was often played in her youth. Music filled the room. Old Mrs. Henderson stopped, her eyes glowing with a faint light. She listened. Her body began to tremble. Jake saw in her eyes the gleam of what maybe had once been humanity. He gradually increased the volume. Suddenly, Mrs. Henderson closed her eyes and her body froze. She turned and walked slowly towards the window, as if dancing to music.